Hey guys, welcome to another freaking video. And today I'm here watching from this YouTuber. What else? His name is He's Short. And yeah, like and subscribe to him.
My grandma called me crying. Please, I need your help. Grandma, what happened? Some boys your age, they bullied me on camera to go viral. I didn't know what she meant, but that's when she sent me a video that someone posted of her on an anonymous account. In it, she was ordering a black coffee at McDonald's, and the boy at the counter gave her a Coke instead. She politely raised her hand and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I think there was a mistake with my order." And that's when his two friends started laughing from behind the counter, trying to make her cry so they could get more views for when they posted the video of her on TikTok. I texted her, "Go home, Grandma, I got this, it won't happen again." I immediately made a group chat with my buddies Rocco and Gavin and sent them the location of the McDonald's she went to, along with the video she sent me. "These people hurt my grandma. We're going tomorrow, and we're going to scare the shit." I walked up to him. Our filmer served me himself. Everyone called me ma'am. It's nice to be treated like a person. Instantly remembered him. He'd proposed to her right here in this restaurant 5 years ago. I said yes. My wife died of cancer, so I was willing to do anything. But then the man walked back out, and the owner immediately pulled me aside. "I heard that. What if that woman dies here while eating? I'll get sued. I'll lose the restaurant. Get them out right now." I told him they were having their meal, but the owner scoffed. "Fine. If you won't tell them to leave, I will." He stormed out toward the dining room immediately. I followed him out and saw the woman touching the rose petals while her husband held her hands. The owner walked up to them. "We can't serve you tonight. You need to leave." The husband asked why, and the owner replied, "Liability. If she dies here, I pay the price, not you." The woman's face fell, and she said quietly, "It's okay. I understand." She tried to push herself up, but her arms were shaking, and she didn't have the strength to stand up. I stepped between them. "They're not leaving." The owner's face twisted instantly, and he told me, "Just because your own wife died of cancer doesn't mean you need to be their knight in shining armor. Now get back in the kitchen or you're fired." He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. I was in disbelief and stepped toward him. "I have 3 Michelin stars to my name. You own a building. They're staying, or I walk and your restaurant goes out of business. You wouldn't dare." I started taking off my apron. Okay, fine. They can stay." The owner stormed back to his office. I turned back to the couple, and the woman was crying. The husband shook my hand. "I'm sorry about your wife." I went back to cook their proposal meal. The owner's face was red, but he couldn't do anything. I brought out the food personally, and when the woman finished eating, her husband cried, "This is the most she's eaten in weeks." After they walked out, I took off my apron and threw it at the owner. Nobody talks about my wife like that. I quit. I walked home, and weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. "I went to the restaurant to give you this, but it was closed down for some reason. So I found your address. My wife passed last night. Her last words were about the proposal recreation. Thank you for everything. I'm sure both our wives are waiting for us somewhere better right now." For 6 years after my brother died, I kept his Xbox controller on the couch next to me. Every Saturday, he'd come in, ruffle my hair, and say, "Come here, little man," as he handed
1,000 years later, 6.5 hours later, a few inches later, day 2, day 3, day 4, a few moments later, 1 eternity later, 3 days later, 12 seconds later, 3:28 a.m. 3 weeks later, many months later.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
Tomorrow for sure. Eventually, 12 o'clock midnight, 2 hours later. Meanwhile, 8:01 p.m. the next day. Later, 20 minutes later. 6 hours later. Several bad puns later. 1 hour later. 2 hours later. 3 hours later.
Can you move it along?
For 6 years after my brother died, I kept his Xbox controller on the couch next to me. Every Saturday, he'd come in, ruffle my hair, and say, "Come here, little man," as he handed me the black controller and took the red one for himself. The first time I asked to be player 1, he wagged his finger and said, "No, dude, player 2's the better seat. You get to watch someone you love have fun." I never asked again. I lived for Saturdays just to spend time with him. Then one spring, he died. After that, I played alone, but would always put the red controller back on his cushion. It wasn't the same, but he was was still there next to me in spirit. A year after I lost him, my little brother Noah was born. At 2, he reached for the red controller, and I moved it to the armrest. At 3, he pointed at it and asked whose it was. I told him his brother's, and he asked who his brother was. I told him a good one. At 4, he asked to play every Saturday. I made excuses for a year. Then one morning he climbed up, put his hands on my knee, and said, "Please, just once." I didn't have anything left. I patted the cushion next to me and said, "Come here, little man." Noah scrambled up. I gave him the black controller and picked up the red one for the first time. "Can I be player 1? I wagged my finger and ruffled his hair. "No, dude, player 2's the better seat. You get to watch someone you love have fun." Noah settled into the cushion with both hands on the controller. That's when I realized I was doing what my brother used to do. I looked down at Noah, grinning at the screen. Ethan was right. It is the better seat. I'd been fighting the same tie for an hour, and picture day was in 20 minutes. I had a YouTube tutorial, was on my own with it. The silky 8-year-old to tie him on a blanket, earbuds in, scrolling on TikTok. The kid looked about 3. 20 feet past them was a bridge where the water got fast and deep. I cupped my hands around my mouth and yelled, "Hey!" across the river, but she didn't even look up. Then the boy leaned forward, and the iPad slipped right out of his hands into the water. I set my rod down on the bank. I knew this wasn't going to end well. The boy jumped in after it. I yelled, "Ma'am, your son is in the water," as loud as I could, but she didn't move. She just sat there scrolling. The boy's head popped up 10 feet from where he fell, crying and splashing, his arms slapping the water. He went under again and came back up further down. I ran into the river. The cold hit my chest and knocked the air out of my lungs. I pushed off the bottom and started swimming. His head dipped under a third time and stayed under longer. I kicked harder. When he came back up, I was close enough to see his face. His eyes were starting to close. I reached out and missed him by a few inches, the water pulling him just past my fingers. The bridge was right behind his head now. I took one more stroke and got a hand on the back of his shirt. The river tried to take us both, and for a second I thought it would. I kicked off the bottom and dragged us sideways out of the current, coughing up water, the boy crying into my shoulder. I carried him to the shore and walked up to her. She finally looked up, saw a soaking stranger holding her son, and started screaming, "My baby! My baby! He's trying to take my baby!" She hadn't heard me scream across the river, but suddenly she found her voice. I called 911. The cops showed up and she was still screaming when they put the cuffs on her. A CPS worker showed up a few minutes later and lifted the boy out of my arms. As they walked the mom to the cruiser, her phone still in her hand, I lifted my middle finger and yelled, "You can tick on this." My dad and I played catch every night until I almost stopped showing up. He'd come home from work.
Geben Sie zu jeder Wäsche Lenor Wäscheparfum in die Trommel. Für nonstop Frische.
Die U-Bahn ist voll, es hat 30 Grad. Keine Angst, dass ich riech, ich hab Lenor am Start. Die ist fresh, fresh, fresh-tastic.
Lenor Unstoppables. Stoppt das Müffeln. Viel Fresh-tastic.
Hang his keys on the hook by the door, grab his glove off the shelf and say, "Let's go." I'd grab mine and follow him out. We'd play in the front yard until Mom called us in for dinner. That catch was the only thing my dad and I did together, just the two of us. Then one Saturday my friend Zach walked past my house, saw us in the yard and said, "Bro, you still play catch with your dad?" I laughed it off, but something landed wrong. By the end of that week, I'd decided I was too old for it. Monday night, Dad came home, hung his keys, grabbed his glove, and said, "Let's go." I told him I was good. He paused for a second, then said, "Okay," and went out alone. I didn't know it then, but that was the first night I picked anything over my dad. I watched him through the window. He stood in the yard for a minute with his glove on, looking around like he wasn't sure what to do, then walked over to the garage wall and started throwing the ball against it by himself. Next night, same thing. Then the whole rest of the week. By the second week, he stopped pausing when I told him no. By the third week, he stopped asking. He'd just come home, hang his keys, grab his glove, and head straight out the door alone. One night, I went into the kitchen for water and heard him on the porch with my mom. He was asking her if he should stop bringing the glove out. She told him to give me time. He said, "I just liked playing with him." He was talking about me like it was over. I knew what I had to do. I walked over to the shelf and grabbed my glove. He was still in the yard with his hand on his hip, looking at the ground. I walked up and he looked at me, didn't say anything. I threw the ball to him. He caught it and threw it back. We played in the yard until the street light came on. The next night he came home, hung his keys, grabbed his glove, and said, "Let's go." I grabbed mine. He never stopped wanting to play. I almost let shame end the only thing we had. I caught a 4-year-old licking the soap dispenser in my preschool bathroom. "What are you doing?" He looked extremely scared. "Don't tell anyone about this. I won't do
Bruh.